Hello, and welcome to another episode of Unworthy History. Now, here on this show, we talk about stuff that isn't worthy of the TV channels like the History Channel. Now, this month it's February when I'm recording this, which is Black History Month, and so far I haven't really seen anything on the History Channel about Black history, or, well, there's really not much history, period. So maybe there has been, but something that you probably wouldn't see, even if they did do specials on it, was stories about how black men also fought Indians out west. There were the Buffalo Soldiers. Then there were also many other black ranchers who also had ordeals with Indians. So this is one story about Britt Johnson. So he is someone who I'm going to read his story now. So this is from the same book that I've been reading from, a lot of these. It's from Indian Depredations in Texas. To Colonel Graham we are indebted for the following thrilling narrative. This is the same Britt Johnson incidentally referred to in the article contributed by Captain Barry, published elsewhere in this book. So I'll have to check on that for a later episode. There's also stuff, if you just Google Britt Johnson, Britt Johnson, you'll see he's on like the Texas State Historical Society. There's some information about him as well on there. The free air of the prairies, the stern trials of frontier life have always developed a manly, self-reliant, and courageous people in Texas. During the war between the states, there lived in Young County on Peters Colony, survey number 702, situated on the south side of Elm Creek, about 3 miles from its junction with the Brazos River, Moses Johnson, grandfather of Parker Johnson. With Moses Johnson lived Britt Johnson, commonly known as Brit. He was a shining jet black man of splendid physique and fine expression of face, which plainly manifested his kindly and manly characteristics. Brit had a wife and 4 children, all of whom he dearly loved. His master, Moses Johnson, had allowed him the enlarged liberty which belongs to the frontier, often relying in part upon his strong arm to help defend the family and neighborhood from the raids of hostile bands of Indians. On the 13th day of October, 1864, while Britt Johnson was absent in Parker County after supplies for his master's family, 1,000 Comanche warriors swept through the doomed little neighborhood, carrying death and desolation to every hearthstone. They killed Britt's son Jim, Joel Myers, Dr. T.J. Wilson, James McCoy, and his son Miles, the widow Durgan, and 5 out of 15 Texas Rangers, and wounded many others. They carried away as captives the widow Patrick, her 2 granddaughters, daughters of the slain widow Durgan, and Britt's wife, and those of his children whom they had not murdered. They also started with Joe, son of his slain widow Durgan, but being sick and unable to stand the fatigue of the march, they killed him on the second day's journey. When Britt reached home, he shared in and felt the common ruin to the community, but was not paralyzed by his great grief, and with a courage possessed by few, he determined to have back his wife and children, or else perish in the effort. Under the generous treatment of his master, he became the owner of a large number of horses and cattle, and when peace, like an angel of mercy with healing on her wings, blessed the country in 1865 and also gave him his freedom, he tried every pathway to recover his lost ones. He visited the forts of the Indian Territory and offered for ransom all he had. He made inquiries of Indian agents and of Indians who visited the agencies, but all in vain. Finally, he returned to his Texas home, cast down and disappointed by his futile efforts, but not unnerved. He determined to go alone hundreds of miles through a howling wilderness infested with hostile savages and find the Indians who held his wife as a slave. It was useless to ask anyone to go with him on such a perilous mission, so he carefully packed with provisions 1 horse, and mounting his favorite black steed, he started from Young County to seek the villages of the wild tribes far out on the plains. He traveled for several weeks continuously, mostly by night, in a northwesterly direction through what is known as the Panhandle of Texas. One evening, when about 30 miles distant from the Indian encampment where his wife and children were, he discovered upon a mountain peak the Indian pickets. They discovered him about the same time. Britt signaled them as a friend, approached them, and informed them as best as he could that his purposes were friendly, that he wanted to find his wife and be one of the tribe. These pickets detained him for 3 days, probably awaiting instructions from the chief of the village, when he was escorted into the main Indian encampment. Here he was kindly received, did everything in his power to disarm the suspicion of the Indians, was given his wife and children, and became a member of the tribe. It was the custom of the Indians when hunting for game to scatter out over the plains in small squads to kill and cure their meat. Britt took advantage of this custom, got his wife and children, and one of the captured, Mrs. Durgan, in his hunting party, and on a seasonable occasion in the summer of 1865, under the friendly shades of night, set out with his party on horseback for his Texas home, which he finally reached in safety, guided only by the stars and his general knowledge of the country. His stay among the wild tribes of the plains gave him a fund of information as to their manner and mode of fighting, the meaning of their telegraphs, smoke signals, etc., and after his return home, it was Britt's greatest delight to talk over with his old friends his life spent among the Indians and relate adventures, privations, and hardships incident to his hazardous mission. It was not destined, however, that Britt should enjoy for a long season the inestimable happiness which the reclamation of his loved ones had brought him. The Indians never forgot or forgave what they deemed his treachery to their tribe. In the latter part of January of 1871, while returning from Weatherford with a couple of other black men who were to assist him in gathering in his stock, they camped overnight on the old military road, about 4 miles east of Salt Creek. Unaware to each other, a freight train was camped on the same road about 1.5 miles further west. Early the next morning, between daylight and sunup, while the freighters were rounding in their stock, about 25 mounted warriors suddenly appeared and began hostile maneuvers, but about this time rapid and continued firing began at Britt's camp, to which his party of warriors hastened. The freighters, taking refuge on a brush mound from whence they could see, witnessed the flight at Britt's camp. A large band of painted warriors, once the friends but now the deadly enemies of Britt, had surrounded him and his two companions, and were making the very earth tremble beneath the clattering hoofs of their horses, while their hideous yells broke the stillness of the early morning. Britt's companions fell early in the action, but his courage was equal to the occasion, and he was determined as well. He knew his time had come, resolved to sell his life early to his resolved to sell his life dearly to his foes. Like the great king-making baron on his last bloody field, Britt drew his bowie knife and deliberately cut the throat of his favorite black steed that had borne him safely through many perils, and of his body made a breastwork. Armed with his own weapon and that of his fallen comrades as well, Britt fought with a desperation almost supernatural, killing and wounding many of his assailants before he went to eternal rest. When the battleground was afterward visited, 173 cartridge shells were counted lying around his dead body. The savage demons cut off his ears, one of his arms, disemboweled him, then killed and thrust in his pet little dog, besides otherwise fearfully mutilating his person. But his dauntless spirit had taken its flight before one of them was able to lay their bloody hands upon him. The remains of Britt and his two companions lie buried on the north side of the road, near the spot where they fell. So that's near present-day Weatherford, Texas. So quite some interesting history, again, coming from this very insightful book, Indian Depredations in Texas, that was published around 1881 or so. And so I hope you enjoyed reading that story, or hearing that story. If you're interested in more about Britt Johnson's life, you can check out this book. This is a more recently published book, but this is a longer story about Britt, so Killed by Indians, 1871. I didn't want to show that book, of course, until the end of the story. Unfortunately, a lot of these Indian depredations in Texas stories don't end well, and that was one, although Britt, didn't go down without a fight, and he was able to get his family back as well. So anyhow, I hope you enjoyed this video, And if you did, be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Unworthy History.